On this edition, I'm just going to recap the Ultimate Fighter finale that took place last night. Now, it's just been a great weekend of fights altogether. And, this really from top to bottom, this was a really good card. A lot of good finishes, a lot of good battles. And obviously, a new Ultimate Fighter was crowned, or the winner of the Ultimate Fighter was crowned. That was Colton Smith. The first fight was Dustin Poirier versus Jonathan Brookins. Now, this fight started out just absolute fireworks. I mean, both sides, both were firing back and forth. I think it was more the fact that Brookins started out very strong in the beginning of the fight, really established his jab, was pressing the pace, was pushing Poirier up against the cage, and was landing some good strikes. But I mean, Poirier improved leaps and bounds from his fight with Chan Sung Jung. I mean, standing in there, I mean, he's got a really good chin. We all know he has good ground, which he obviously showed at the end of this fight. But he really turned it on when his back was against the wall. Brookins was really applying the pressure, and then Poirier just turned it on. Really almost just a shift of momentum went to Poirier. Poirier started really pressing with the strikes, coming forward, lands some big shots. Brookins went to shoot for the takedown. It was not the strongest of takedowns, and Poirier locked in the Darce choke. Just something that he lost to in his last fight to Chan Sung Jung, but it's his submission of choice. That was in tight, especially against a submission guy like Brookins. I mean, it's a big submission victory, and obviously a very big win, and it's a huge statement for Poirier as well. And where does he stand? He's definitely one of the top fighters in the division. So exceptional win for Dustin Poirier. I think he just, like Rogan said, just one of the top prospects. I mean, it was a very difficult fight for him, his last fight, to go up against a fighter like Chan Sung Jung, and obviously for him to defeat a fighter like Jonathan Brookins in a season where the Ultimate Fighter, Brookins won the Ultimate Fighter season that Poirier was turned down from. So, like he said, it's very sweet for him to get that win. The next fight was Shane del Rosario versus Pat Barry. Now, I always tend to pick against Pat Barry, and I really don't like doing so. I think Pat Barry's got such good striking. I just always think that there's just that big hole in his ground game. And he continues to show how much he's really trying to grasp and play catch-up with his ground game. We all know the striker that Pat Barry is. He's an undersized guy for the division. He's got good speed for the division, really good striking, good power. And Del Rosario came out strong. First round, got down to the ground. He really had to work, too. That was the impressive thing, is that Barry's takedown defense has improved. His submission defense has improved. Now, it wasn't what we would call a grappling, just absolute finesse and incredible grappling for either side. Del Rosario could not get his hooks in with the rear naked choke, but Barry's submission defense has improved. Second round going into it, I will not admit to this, well, I will, is that I thought it was Barry's fight from there on out. Del Rosario was exhausted. Del Rosario's, the momentum had shifted, and the momentum was in Pat Barry's hands, and Pat Barry connected with just massive strikes. I mean, landed a huge strike right in the center of the octagon. Del Rosario pressed back against the cage, and then Pat Barry just finished it with the rest. I think it was a left that he caught him with, just knockout of the night of honors. I mean, no doubt about it. And Del Rosario was out cold for a very quick moment, but it was just an impressive knockout by Pat Barry, just a really good showing by Pat Barry. And, I tend, every time I pick against Pat Barry, I'm wrong with my pick. So I think I've learned a valuable lesson, but doesn't mean I'm going to continue to pick for him in the future. Depends on the matchup. But I think the one thing that really stands out the most in regards to Pat Barry's win, obviously, how he fought was impressive, but I think the words that he had to say after in the octagon, most people tend to talk about their performance, how they fought, and all these other things. And Pat Barry talked about what really is most important at this time with what happened recently in Connecticut. And Pat Barry offered one of the best life lessons, is that love and compassion and forgiving people. It was just, it was really touching. It was a very touching post-fight speech, and it really, I may not be a diehard Pat Barry fan, but you've earned, my undying allegiance, Pat Barry. You're just. It's such a classy move. I know people, I mean, whether they love you or whether they hate you, but I mean, you've earned a fan out of me. I mean, I wasn't what you would call a diehard fan before this, but you've earned a fan out of me. And it's not so much how you perform sometimes, but also how you carry yourself. And, hats off to you, Pat Barry. Just incredible, really, is that, you could go on and talk about how great your training camp was and how exceptional you fought, but, you summed things up perfectly, is that it's not about yourself. It was just such a selfless act, and I commend you for it, and all the respect to you. So I wish you nothing but the best moving forward. Next fight was obviously the Ultimate Fighter finale, which was, well, not the finale, which was the final event, or the final fight between Colton Smith and Mike Ricci. It was just, the best way to sum up this fight is that Ricci couldn't get anything going. Ricci couldn't get anything going, and Colton Smith's wrestling was the X factor in this fight. And I remember, that is the best way you could put it, is that Colton Smith's style of fighting is not exciting at all. okay, but it is very effective. And from round to round to round, for 3 rounds, Ricci could not get anything going at all. Could not get his striking going, couldn't get anything going. Good submission defense, but really just hardly any sense of urgency. Just that's what shows you what a good fighter does or a good grappler does, is that the other fighter cannot get their game going or can get their fighting going. Ricci could not get anything going because of how effective Colton Smith's grappling was, how tenacious he was, how relentless he was. I think what was it? Joe Rogan was talking about comparing it to almost Randy Couture. He said you're going to fight like Randy Couture, and Smith said yes. Now, was his grappling or his pace and how relentless he was like Randy Couture? He didn't throw as much ground and pound as Randy Couture. Will Colton Smith be a top-tier fighter in the UFC? I think he's got a long way to go. I think you put him up against an elite-level grappler. I mean, a guy's going to be able to get out from under that, and Smith's tough, but we'll see. Impressive performance, very effective performance, but where does he stand? Is he up there in the top of the rankings in this division? No, and I think Ricci needs to drop down to his right weight, which is, I believe, is 145 and not 155. The final fight of the night was Roy Nelson versus Matt Mitrione. Now, I'm a big fan of Matt Mitrione. Obviously, I also like Roy Nelson as well. Maybe not so much his antics, but both guys are exciting fighters. Both guys are obviously on the same season of The Ultimate Fighter with Rashad Evans and Rampage Jackson. Both good personalities, or characters as you would call them, but the fight was, I thought it was awesome. It was an awesome round of fighting, is that Mitrione came on very strong, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He was going to out-athlete or outwork Roy Nelson, and it looked to be working at first, is that Nelson couldn't get Mitrione really down to the ground. Mitrione looked strong, looked in shape. His striking looked great. He was starting to establish his leg kicks and working the hands, and definitely caught Nelson a couple of times, forcing him to cover up. But, Nelson started to push forward. It was really just another shift of momentum. Nelson pushed forward, landed his strikes. He caught Mitrione right on the button, and then finished him. Just sent him down the ground, finished him clean. I thought it wasn't such a bad fight by Mitrione. I thought it was a better fight by Roy Nelson. Obviously, this isn't Shane Carwin that he's fighting. I think Mitrione's a good fighter. I think he'll be a better gatekeeper in the UFC than he will be so much a champion, which he never will be. And hats off to him stepping in, and I thought it was a great fight by Roy Nelson. Now, where does Roy Nelson go from here? I think, I forgot who brought it up yesterday. I think it might have been Damon Martin, if I'm not mistaken, but the idea was that Roy Nelson fights Daniel Cormier, and I couldn't agree more. If Daniel Cormier is to win in his last Strikeforce fight, I think for him to move on and to face Roy Nelson would make some sense. I would have liked to see Cormier take on Fabricio Verdum. I would like to see him be up there more, but, once again, is that Daniel Cormier's had 2 really strong fights, against strong fighters, which was Antonio Bigfoot Silva and obviously Josh Barnett. But other than that, he has not faced much talent before that. And that's not taken away from his performances that he has done. I think Daniel Cormier is most definitely a future champion. I will go on record saying that, whether it's heavyweight or light heavyweight. I know that's a tall task against JDS or John Jones, but I think it's a good matchup for him moving forward in Roy Nelson. I think it'll be the ultimate test. If he is to defeat Roy Nelson, maybe it's 1-2 fights from there, but I'd like to see Daniel Cormier and Roy Nelson take each other on for the next fight. And that is if Daniel Cormier is successful in his final Strikeforce fight. I thought it was a great card altogether. Excellent night, excellent weekend of fights, excellent night of fights, and obviously we get our next round of fights, our next batch of fights at UFC 155, December 29th. So that's why for this edition, it's Kyle Delaney signing off.